Okay, so like I said, we're here to learn a little bit more about these three public art calls. You may have noticed we have quite a lot of public art calls opening this month, and we'll have more coming up soon. But these are three really exciting projects, and these are projects that I am the administrator for. We're going to do a number of things. Hopefully, it won't take the full hour and a half, but I just wanted to give us enough time to kind of cover each project and take questions and then do a cafe tutorial for anyone who might need it. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the public art program, just kind of how it started, what it's for, and touch on our selection panel and the process that's involved in selecting the art. This is just a quick overview. Then we'll get a little more in detail to the things that will really help you guys as artists applying for these calls. We'll talk about what are the materials that are required when you apply for these RFQs. And then we'll dig into those three specific projects where I can tell you a little bit more about the location, some of the specifics, and really emphasize kind of what are the goals and themes that the selection panels have put out for those calls. And then we'll open it up to question and answer. While I present, feel free to put questions in the chat. Since we have so much to cover, I probably will save my responses until the end, but if you want to put those in the chat so you don't forget them, then I'll go through those first when we get to the Q&A. Okay, so Denver Public Arts Program, it started in 1998 by an executive order by Mayor Pena, and then it was adopted as an ordinance in 1991. So since 1991, we've had this ordinance that basically says that in the city of Denver, any capital improvement project that is over $1 million must set aside 1% of its overall budget for the installation of public art, either in or near that site. That's how we have so many great public art projects in the city. Since that ordinance, we've installed more than 400 pieces. And there's a number of other cities throughout the country that have this similar 1% program, which you may be very familiar with. So public art, kind of, looking through excuse me. Okay. So public art in terms of other art, it has specific goals that are unique from, maybe art in a museum, art in your home. There are some things that we really look for and things that our panelists are thinking through as they set out the goals. And that one is that the public art is site specific and unique to that location, that it really in some way speaks to the users at that location. Maybe it's a story of the community that lives there. Maybe it's something of the history. Maybe it's just responding to the particular geography of the place, but it is site specific to that location and couldn't be just plopped down anywhere. We hope that public art really enhances the experience of being in that space. And then for our program, it's very important that the public art is selected through an open and transparent process, which is the selection panel process, which I will tell you a little bit more about. And in this way, our community residents really have an opportunity to choose the art within their environment and have an impact on their space. So what is public art? It's an interesting question worth considering because it can certainly take many forms and the list is always growing. But just to touch on it, some of the major forms, major types of art that we see in the public art sphere are, of course, going to be sculpture, a lot of 3D media, different materials, a lot of painting, whether that be a mural or a standalone framed artwork. We have some artworks that are involving more graphic arts, printmaking, photography. Mosaics is a pretty popular outdoor public art medium, but in some of our indoor calls, we may see some of those more fragile art mediums, such as like fiber, might be able to have some pieces that are made out of clay. Earthworks can also be public art. We have some really interesting ones that are being made right now that are out of rammed earth. And then quite a few, light, digital, and sound media as well. This is obviously not all inclusive, but just kind of a general overview. On the flip side, kind of thinking through what we or the selection panel would not consider public art. First thing would be those mass-produced objects. So if you have a piece of art that, you have 50 of them and you can buy them everywhere and you can put them anywhere, that's not what we're looking for in these calls because, again, we want that to be unique to that location. Similarly, if it's a reproduction of a work that you've already made, that's not what we would be looking for in this call, as we're seeking the creation of a new public artwork that is in collaboration with the community. We also wouldn't be looking for work that is sort of wayfinding or advertising, such as like this Tremont downtown sign that you see to the right. And this one's a little tricky, but landscaping generally wouldn't be what we are looking for. I mean, there are exceptions to that, but we really want the public art to last for the community as long as possible. So therefore, if it's made out of, plant materials, things like that, that's not something we can maintain over time. So again, that's not everything and anything, but hopefully it gives you just a general broad stroke approach to what kind of is and isn't public art when we're reviewing applications. So as I mentioned, the Denver public art process goes through the public selection process. We have two oversight committees that monitor our process throughout to make sure that it's fair and transparent. And in our process, it is a selection panel that will be viewing your applications and ultimately choosing the commission. It's important to note that myself or any of the public art staff in general, we do not get a vote in what artwork is chosen. My role here is to facilitate the process, to provide support to the panelists and also to the artists along the way. Um, but our selection panel, their role is, they're going to first meet and really review the site and set out parameters for where are the general locations that they might want this artwork to exist, maybe some media specifics, and really outline goals and themes that are important to them as a community. The bulk of this conversation is what you see in the RFQ when it's listing, the media and materials, the location, and the goals. Those are directly from our selection panel's conversations. Our selection panel is composed for each project. It has a similar composition that's defined by the ordinance. We have a minimum of 3 community members. Those are going to be people that either live or work right around the project area and know the space well. We always have an artist and an arts professional representative on the panel, as well as a member from our two oversight committees, the Public Art Committee and the Denver Commission on Cultural Affairs. And we also will have a representative from City Council. Just a plug here as well as artists yourselves, if you're ever looking for just some behind the scenes insight on this process, definitely you might consider applying to be an artist on a future panel. You can apply to be considered for a selection panel on our website. One note is you obviously would not be able to apply for the project that you would be on the panel for, but it can just provide some really interesting insight for future projects. So just saying. So the process is a long one. Generally, it takes 4 to 6 months from sort of the creation of that selection panel to the selection of the artwork. We're just here at step 2. So the panel has already been made, approved, and they've had that first meeting where they've set out their goals. Now we've put out the request for qualifications. That's available on our website and call for entry. That's what you have seen while you're here today. That'll be out for a month. And then once it closes, our selection panel will do the work of independently reviewing all of the RFQs, voting on them, and ultimately narrowing the pool down to 3 to 5 finalists. It's up to the panel whether they choose 3, 4, or 5 finalists, so it varies project by project. But those finalists will receive an honorarium to make the proposal that is specific to this project. They will receive more information and time and have opportunity to meet with community members and technical experts and visit the site, all to inform their proposal better. And then over that time, then the finalists, will present their proposals to the panel, who will ultimately vote on their final selection. So here's just a visual of that. We're kind of right there at that yellow square where the call is open. I will repeat this a number of times, but I just want to make clear that at this stage, it is the RFQ, not an RFP. So at this stage, we just want to see your qualifications. We want to see images of previous work. We do not want to see a proposal for the specific project. Proposals will be done by the finalists later in that process. So just to make sure, especially if it's your first time applying, there is that difference between sort of an RFQ and an RFP. So I'll go into this more, but we're looking for images of your work. We'll ask for an artist statement and a resume. This is really to give the panel an idea of who you are, what your artistic style looks like, if it seems like a good fit, and if they want to see more from you. Okay, so all of our RFQs are going to have similar requirements, which if you've applied before, and many of you have, you're familiar with them. But there are slight differences from project to project. But generally, we're going to ask for 4 to 6 images of past work with 1 video allowance. We'll ask for a resume and a statement of interest that's no longer than 2,000 characters. I would really stress the importance of the statement of interest because it can really be your opportunity to speak to the goals that are listed in that RFQ and indicate your interest in that specific community. Especially if you haven't done a public art project before, or perhaps you're working in a medium that is different than what is called out. Maybe you're a muralist, but you're looking to translate your work to 3D for the first time. The statement of interest is really the opportunity to say the things that your images might not say and give the panel just a quick indication of like how you might, achieve that. So pay attention to those. Obviously, it's totally understandable that people are applying to numerous calls and there's going to be copy and pasting, but just look because there are some slight nuances from project to project, and the statement of interest questions may be pretty specific to what that panel is looking for. For images, obviously, that is a crucial part of the process. It's the first impression that the panelists have to see your work. So it's really important that you take time and present, high quality images. You can submit 1 video as well. One little note here, just with Cafe, just kind of a quirk. If you do submit a video piece, don't put that as your first slide, just when you actually apply through call for entry, because it kind of just shows up as a blank spot. So put it towards the end, just a little kind of cafe quirk. Obviously, consider the quality of your images. Cafe has a minimum requirement of 1,200 pixels and JPEGs only, and we want to make sure that there's good lighting and we can really see your work. And once again, just to make this really clear, we ask for 4 to 6 images of your work, not specifically of public artwork. So if you do not have public artwork in your portfolio, please don't let that stop you from applying. We're just looking for images of your work. Of course, if you have public art experience, you're going to show that, but I just want to make sure that people who may be doing this for the first time know that we really encourage you to apply with the work that you have. So here's an idea of sort of a good versus bad image in terms of being able to see your work when we're jurying. The image to the left, it's a beautiful picture, but it's pretty wide angle. It's kind of hard to see what the subject is, and the artwork itself is pretty small. Our panelists are looking through, you know, 100, 200 applications. They're going to move fairly quickly. If your artwork is hard to see and blurry, they may not spend the time to get to know it. On the right, this artwork instead, gives you a really good sense of scale. It fills the entire frame. It has good lighting. So we have a really good quick impression of that public artwork. Please also one note, if you are an artist who has worked or is working as part of like a duo or a team, or perhaps you have apprenticed with someone else, feel free to submit those images, but we ask that you clarify that in the image description to make sure we know that this was done, as part of a partnership or, in whatever circumstance that is, so that you're not taking credit for anyone else's work. Okay, the resume section is pretty self-explanatory. Of course, we're going to want a resume from every applicant, but we need to keep it, to a concise length. So we ask for just a 2-page maximum resume. If you are working as a collective or a group, you can submit a resume for each team member, but only 1-page length for each team member. The application will ask you to name your resume file as last name dot first initial. Obviously, if you're working as a collective, You can use a different naming convention, but just the important thing is that you stay consistent between your different files so that we know they're all part of the same. Okay, so once again, the statement of interest. Every RFQ is going to have one, and they're usually going to have 2 to 3 questions. Some might have another one. They can be found towards the bottom of your RFQ. So if you haven't seen them yet, make sure to go back to the RFQ and read them in detail. Take this step seriously, make each one unique and double check for errors. Like I said, it's totally understandable if you're kind of copying from one project to another, but nothing looks worse to a panelist than when you're talking about a completely different project than the one that they're jurying. So proofread. And again, just stressing how important the statement of interest and how helpful the statement of interest really can be for first-time artists or artists who are switching mediums. I've seen a lot of artists successfully use it as a way to just note how they might strategize. Like, I haven't done public art before, but I plan to partner with X fabricator who has experience, or, I will be working with another artist who has these skills. Obviously, we're not asking for all the details in a proposal, but it can help sort of calm any concerns they might have of, okay, are they ready for this? And it can also clarify any misunderstanding. So if it's a call that specifically says, hey, we don't have a wall for a mural, and we see an applicant who's presenting only murals, we might just think, I don't think they read the call. They must be applying for something else. But if your statement of interest says, I am a muralist, but I am looking to translate my work, then it's very clear to us that you are applying to this call and you're looking to sort of switch mediums or try something new. Okay, let's see, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay. So we have a lot of calls right now. So we have Ross-Broadway, Ross University Library, West Jewell Bicycle Bridge. We'll talk about those 3 today, but I just want to make sure that I mention as well that we have Bethesda Park as an open call in Southeast Denver, as well as a rather large commission that is the Bonfils Staten Theater at Loretto Heights. We also just opened a Lena Archuleta branch library call. So I want to call attention to those. The Bethesda and Loretto Heights, excuse me, my phone rang. The Bethesda and Loretto Heights pre-app meetings have already happened, but the videos for them are available on the Denver Public Art website. So if you weren't able to attend that, you can go back and review them. And the Lena Archuleta pre-app meeting is on December 2nd. One other thing to point out, the Lena Archuleta library is unique in that it is asking for previously completed artworks. So that is a rare occasion, but that is a really great opportunity as well. If you have framed artworks, things that are ready to go, I would suggest checking those out as well. Okay, but moving into the 3 ones we're here to talk about tonight, the first opportunity is Ross-Broadway. This is associated with a renovation and an expansion of this library, which is located at 33 East Bayou Street in District 7. The budget is $77,000 for this public art project. And the panel is looking for an artwork to be placed in a new outdoor courtyard, which is being constructed as part of the renovation and will be right outside what is now a garage space, but will then be a community meeting space. Based on the location being an outdoor courtyard, it's likely that this will be a 3D media opportunity, but not, necessarily. The main thing is that the work must be suitable for outdoor environments. There may be some interesting possibilities as well for sort of like a mobile or something that plays with vertical space, which I'll talk a little bit about. And then some members of the panel also indicated a strong interest in light-based or digital media, so that's something to consider as well. One thing that's really important with this call is the historic significance of the building and the mid-century aesthetic of the building's architecture. This panel, I'll talk a bit more, but the desire is that this new artwork can exist harmoniously with that architecture, but while still speaking to a contemporary audience. So here are a few images of that library if you're not familiar. Up top is original architectural drawing. Below is the building today, and to the right are some images from 1951 when the library branch first opened. It's a small but really striking and really beloved library that was opened in 1951 and is just 4,500 square feet as it stands right now. This library is really notable from that architectural perspective because it was designed by celebrated mid-century architect Victor Horbein. He was a Denver native, but really became one of Colorado's most famous modernist architects. He was involved in the design of the Mayan Theater, the Oxford Hotel's cruise room, and most notably the Denver Botanic Garden Conservatory, which you see the image of to the right. So just something to know. Here is the floor plan of the original construction of the library with some of its architectural features. So with this renovation, the original architecture, the original space will not be altered outside of, bathroom upgrades and some just interior system upgrades. But there will be a renovation, an addition that will be built to the north, moving into the parking lot space. That addition will be done in the same style so that it looks seamless. Here's just a few more side-by-side pictures, really just to show you that the architecture and so much of the interior design has been kept the same over, half a century. So integrating with or being inspired by the architecture of this building might be an important thing to consider when you think about public artwork here. So here's the renovation scope. Like I said, there will be an addition that will sort of move north into some of the parking lot space. In this image, it's just slightly more bold than the original structure. A lot of the addition is going to be staff spaces. They basically have no office spaces at the moment. There will be some flexible learning spaces and then the transformation of the community room space as well. For our purposes for public art, I'll draw your attention to this area highlighted in yellow because the panel identified that where they want art is in a new courtyard space that will be right in front of the community room. It's not super easy to see in this rendering. One thing to note is we will be getting more detailed renderings of the space within the next month or so. So finalists will be provided with more technical drawings and have an opportunity to talk more with the project manager, of course, but this is what we have right now. There will be an additional entrance here on the side, a vestibule, and then you'll enter into a courtyard space. Here's a top-down view. So the areas that is highlighted in blue is that original building, and then yellow is the courtyard space. There's just some more views. If you look at the rendering on the right, hopefully you can kind of see there is, let's see if I can get a laser pointer. Yeah. So this is the top of the existing garage, which will be the community room. This is the top of that roof, and this is the top of the roof of the rest of the addition. So there is a height difference and a bit of a gap. And the panel was kind of excited about maybe an artwork that could somehow activate that space, something that maybe arches over, fills that space, hangs, who knows. So again, we'll get better renderings, but something to point out that there might be some interesting sort of vertical space to play with. And here's what I have in terms of floor plans at this point. So the dimensions of that sort of courtyard space are approximately 11.5 feet by 22.5 feet, with the height being, approximately 12 feet high at the community room side. Another possibility maybe is this brick space right outside the courtyard, although we will, of course, need to consider doorway access and things like that. This circle here, they're indicating that there may be a tree or a table. But one good thing, since we are working in line with the actual renovation schedule, is we have an opportunity there to sort of integrate with those plans. And, if there was an artwork proposed, that, didn't work with the tree or table, that's we have more of an opportunity to sort of, get in that stage rather than when you're putting artwork in a building that's already finished. Okay, so those are some basics on just the location. I want to talk a bit about the goals. So these are things that are really important to the panel, things that they're hoping that the artwork could in some way embody. So they're hoping for an artwork that really brings a sense of joy, safety, and creativity. The panel had talked at length about how much they love the librarians and the community here and how it really is a welcoming, safe third space for the community. This is a library that's in a pretty urban area that does have a large population of people who are experiencing houselessness. And so the panel really wants the artwork to think about how it can, inspire people of all ages, abilities, but really also have the empathy and attention to connecting with visitors who may be facing homelessness or mental health challenges. Given the notable design of the original building, like we mentioned before, the panel is, of course, hoping for an artwork that can kind of exist harmoniously with such a strong architectural presence. But, we don't want it to look like it was made in 1951. We want the artwork to speak to a contemporary audience. So that's an interesting challenge, I think, for this proposal. And, like many of our panels, they're hoping for an artist or artwork that can in some way involve the library patrons and community in the process. We covered much of this already, but just to break it down again, the artwork site for the Ross-Broadway will be that outdoor courtyard space. Oh, I did forget to mention that they are open to another outdoor space should a finalist see an opportunity. Although I will say that if you're familiar with that library and you walk around the perimeter, there's not a whole lot of space sort of between the building and the sidewalk that doesn't have trees. So there's pretty limited land to work with. And also there are concerns about pedestrian tampering or vehicular impact. But all to say, if you are selected as a finalist and you see a potential for something outside of that courtyard, the panel would be open to considering it as long as it is outdoors. And again, so medium suitable for outdoor display, and they're open to anything that is, but they did note some particular interest in mediums such as mobiles, sculpture, mosaic, or digital or light-based mediums. Okay, moving on to our next library opportunity. This parent project is a renovation of the Ross University Hills Library in Southeast Denver. This budget is $40,000, but this panel is looking for an artwork that can go inside the library. So this one is a really good fit for, I think, for 2D artists, muralists, or artists that are working in mediums that wouldn't be suitable for outdoor environments. They called out a number of materials. Some are, more common that we see of sculpture, painting, but they also specifically called out things like fiber, printmaking, and photography as mediums of interest. So this library opened about a decade after the Ross-Broadway in 1962. It does look quite a bit different than it did when it was originally built there on the left. On the right is how we see it now, and that's because in 1995, it had a large renovation by the same architect who also gave the Ross Cherry Creek Library its very postmodern 90s look. So very different architecture than the last library. There on the left again is the original structure, and the right how it stands today. But we want to focus on the interior. These pictures don't really do it justice, but if you're familiar with the library or have the chance to visit, it really is a very lovely space that's full of light. There's these large windows that go from floor to ceiling. Every time I visited, there's been, a lot of community members, and it's just a really welcoming space. There's a very beloved kid space that all of the panelists talked about. It gets a lot of use both in programming and off hours. They have a dedicated teen space as well. And so you can just kind of get a sense of the environment at this library. It's also a much larger library than the Ross-Broadway space. The renovation, most of what's happening in the building is going to be, system upgrades, things like fire alarms, lighting, HVAC, although there will be as well some expansion of staff spaces, a reimagining of a children's area, and additional flexible learning spaces, and then, of course, some just outdoor parking lot updates. Um, this project is just it's still in the final design process. So this is another opportunity where we can kind of move along with the construction schedule. I forgot to mention for Ross-Broadway, the library did close earlier this month to the public, and this Ross University Library is closing in early December to the public to close for their renovation. So it's too late to go see the Ross-Broadway Library in person if you haven't been before, but you still have a little bit of time to go inside the Ross University Hills Library if you'd like to see it in person. Okay, so this panel is interested in something inside, and they did identify two potential preferred locations, but similar to the last one, they wanted to make it clear that they are open to finalists proposing an alternative interior space if they desire, but these two stood out to them as, areas that could be really great opportunities. This first one is a large wall that is out opposite the circulation desk. There's another image of it. And again, we'll get better renderings as they finish final design. But this wall is approximately 40 to 50 feet long. It's a nice big space. One great thing about it is it's visible from both floors of the building. So this is a view from the second floor space. There's also some wall above it and that skylight that could potentially be opportunities for us. And yeah, it's just kind of a big blank canvas. Some negatives, though, as as you can see, the wall does have those vents and the exit sign. And another thing to note, the panel mentioned an interest in artwork that is in some way interactive. That doesn't always have to mean touchable or movable, but they really want the art to somehow, inspire people to see more or, perhaps lead them through another experience. And so having the wall be so high above someone, could potentially be a pro or a con, depending on what would be planning. Here is the other space that they highlighted. This is the community room on the second floor. Here's another image of it. Um, what's nice about this one is it's an extremely active space that gets rented or used for programming all the time. And it really is used by multi-generational groups. So it's a real opportunity for your artwork to engage with a wide audience. The cons are that it's a highly utilized space used by lots of groups and lots of kids. So that would be something to consider. But it could be an interesting space for artwork as well. Okay, so the goals outlined by this panel, again, these are things they're looking for some evidence of or some potential for in images of your previous work. They're hoping for artworks that can enhance the inviting, comfortable, and cozy interiors. It's a very family-friendly space, so they're looking for art that is appropriate for that environment. They really want the art to help, much like the kid and teen space, they want it to really help encourage a sense of play, a sense of wonder and exploration, not just amongst kids, but just keeping that in mind that they're hoping for some playfulness to the piece. And this is a really involved community. This library community is very, very organized and they really love this space. So they're hoping that the artist or artwork they choose will allow for some opportunity for them to be involved in the process at any, who knows what stage that means, but just to put that out there that they're hoping for some community engagement. Okay. And so again, this is interior. They have identified those two options of the sort of large wall or the community room, but they are open to a finalist proposing a different location within the interior. So the mediums must just be suitable for indoor display and be appropriate for the library environment. And they are open to anything that is, but they are particularly interested in things like mosaics, fiber art, printmaking, photography, painting, or sculpture. All right, our last project. So I will discuss this one and then we will break and I can answer questions, look through any that have been added to the chat or have more of a conversation. But this final project is the West Jewell Avenue Bicycle and Pedestrian Bridge. This is a big one. The budget is $230,000. The location, it will be an exterior piece that will be on, approved areas of the bridge or the ramps on each side. Obviously, this artwork needs to be suitable not only for an outdoor environment, but a particularly high traffic outdoor environment. Along with sculpture or mosaic, this panel also was excited about potential for light or sound-based media. So the bridge, they're just barely starting construction, so you can't see any of it yet. But just to kind of show you if you aren't familiar, this bridge will cross over South Santa Fe Drive on Jewell Avenue. The purpose of this bridge is truly to create access and safety for pedestrians and bicyclists to get east to west across South Santa Fe. If you're a cyclist, you know that's pretty hard to get across there right now. So this will be a great opportunity for more mobility. It's an ADA compliant design. It'll connect people to the Evans station for RTD. Another real, benefit of this is the neighborhoods that are on the east and west side of Santa Fe, calling out specifically neighborhoods like Overland, Platt Park, and Ruby Hill. You know, for years, they've had this highway sort of cutting right in between them and making it hard to connect on both sides. And so the panel and the community really see this bridge as a symbolic opportunity as well to sort of unite those communities and those neighborhoods on each side of Santa Fe. But it will also literally, connect people on the east to an easier way to access like Ruby Hill or the trail and just improve public safety and access. So this is just beginning, and I think it's projected to be finished by the end of 2026, but who knows? But another opportunity where we're getting in early and we can work alongside the parent project. Here's another view. So on this bridge, the east side will have, get my laser pointer. So this east side, the ramp will be sort of a tightly winding helix structure. And then the bridge will cross over. And on the west side, it will be a 400-foot more traditional ramp. There will be stairs and the ramps to provide access to both sides. There will not be elevators. And just to note that this bridge is crossing over not just the highway, but also railroad lines and RTD. Here's another image of the east side helix ramp structure. If you go on our website or go in person, there is a similar helix structure ramp at 47th and York, where we have a public artwork. So that could be a good thing to check out to see how another artist approached a similar project. And then here we have just some 3D models from the project manager, kind of showing the bridge in its entirety. Here's a closer up view of that helix ramp. You can see sort of the stairs on the interior. We're a little more limited in what we can do we can't do anything on the exterior of the span of the bridge. There's a lot of safety and structural parameters, of course, with CDOT and also with the railroad and with RTD. But there are some opportunities we can explore inside the bridge, and then we have a lot more creative freedom on the ramps on each side and also the areas around the ramps or kind of the plazas that are built alongside them. Okay, so this panel is this is a very involved panel as well, including the councilwoman who's very involved in this project. They have a lot of goals, so take them with a grain of salt. This is a lot to ask of an artist, but give it some time. Really, think through which ones might connect with your practice and which things you might want to emphasize. Being a bridge, they really are hoping that this artwork can tie into themes of connectivity and movement. I would say those are the biggest things, are that connection and movement and, uniting the east and west sides. It is, though, a pretty gray industrial location, especially where the East Helix ramp is going. So they want something that's going to be bright and colorful and add a bit of celebration and vibrancy to the area. They're also interested in incorporating elements of interactivity. That could be done through any number of ways, but they called out light, sound, movement, or other creative approaches that just sort of invite the public into the experience. This panel really encourages artists to be educated on the indigenous history of the area, but also more recent history of redlining and social and economic inequities that have happened in this area over the last few decades. While it's not required that your art directly reference that, they ask that every artist, just be educated and think through how they might thoughtfully engage with those histories. The artwork should, this is a bridge that its whole purpose is to increase safety and mobility, and we want to make sure that that is for everyone. So they really emphasize that this artwork needs to incorporate principles of accessibility and universal design. They want it to be enjoyed and experienced by people of all abilities, including individuals with visual impairments. So they really ask that the artists finalists consider multisensory cues and designs that go beyond just the minimum of ADA requirements. This is a big project. It can be a little intimidating, but they wanted to stress that they really encourage emerging artists, especially local artists, to apply, and they are also interested in community engagement. And then since the west side, runs along the trail, they want to also just call out that the artwork respect the ecosystem of the area. So thinking if there is lights or sounds, thinking of ways to not disturb bat or bird movement and just be respectful to the environment of the area. Okay, site and materials again. So the panel, their preferred locations are on or near the bridge, including the interior span, the east helix ramp, the west ramp, or the plaza area that will be built around the east side, with the goal being to enhance the experience for pedestrians and cyclists using that bridge, and maybe visually convey some sense of connection between the east and west side. They're open to any medium suitable for that environment. And it needs to, hold up to that sort of high traffic space. But they called out painting, sculpture, mosaics, or light and sound art as things that are of particular interest to them at this point. Okay, so once again, all three of these calls are open right now, and they will be open until December 1st. They'll close at midnight on December 1st. So think through these calls. Hopefully you have learned enough about them to maybe get a sense of which one or which ones might feel like a really good fit for you and your practice. Consider your images for relevance to each project's location and goals, and use that statement of interest to your advantage, adding specificity and not just, identical statements for every call. You can find out more about these RFQs, as well as the other ones that I mentioned on our website, denverpublicart.org, but also callforentry.org, which is where you will actually submit your application. We have a lot of projects coming up in the next 2 years, and we just are going to get even more with the new bond measures that just passed. So there's a lot of opportunities that will keep coming down the line. So keep an eye on that website. If these ones don't feel like a good fit for you, there very well could be ones coming up soon that are. And just timeline wise, if you haven't been through this process before, so after the call closes, in this case, December 1st, it can take a month to 2 months before the panel has had time to review all the applications and then meet again to collectively vote on their finalists. So be patient. If you have questions along that time period, feel free to email me. My email is listed on the RFQs for each of those projects. You can always check in with me to get an update on where we're at in the process. And if you are selected as a finalist, you will be contacted directly by me via email. And if you are not selected, you will also get an email, but it will be through Cafe. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen and take a look and kind of um, see what questions we might have. Oh, excuse me. Stop sharing. Okay. Pull up the chat. Looks like we have a few things. Would a stained glass window be a welcome option for the Ross-Broadway library? I think it could be as long as it's not in the original part of the building. They don't want anything altered in that original building, but if there was an idea to incorporate stained glass somehow in that courtyard or vestibule space, I think that would be something that they would, yeah, it would definitely be an option to consider. Okay. A suspended sculpture an option for the library interior location. So I'm assuming we're discussing the Ross University Hills Library in that question. And yes, it very well could be. Actually, yeah, that is something that we talked about in the orientation meeting. Um, and yeah, it's definitely on the table if you want to consider sort of a suspended piece. Lucy asks if the panelists are different for each project. And yes, I forgot to mention that, but yes, for every different call that we have, the panelists are different. There may be some repeats in sort of like the council member or a technical expert, but the community members especially are going to be unique to each panel, each project. The deadline for Ross University is December 1st at midnight, which is also the deadline for the other two. Are there projection limitations for 3D work in the Ross University Library? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that one, so I might return to that. Michael asks if you have multiple art examples from one location, can we include a couple pictures in one JPEG submission? I think, and chime in if you ask this question, but I'm interpreting it as like if you made a combination like image with, sort of like a tile with like different images in it. I would not do that. I would make your image be one artwork unless they are related. If it's like a triptych or a diptych or part of one piece, obviously. But if you're just trying to find a way to show 10 images instead of six, I would not uh, uh, suggest that. Would final wraps be appropriate for either internal or external sites? Could be, especially the Ross University one. I could see being an option there. Um, okay, so Emma asks if they have a public art project that they're working on, but it's not expected to be installed until after the application, is it suitable to submit good in-studio process photos? Yes, it's an option to do that. Just be very clear in your description that that is what it is. Decibel limitations for Ross University. Oh, Ross project into space. Oh, yeah. Okay. So clarifying for Ross University Hills, if a piece was on sort of that large wall, how far out can it project? Like, could it be a more sculptural work instead of like a flat mural? Yeah, I think that could very well be an option. Obviously, when we learn a little bit more, but by the time we get to the proposal stage, we'll have more technical info, but we would consult with the project management team for the library and just get any specifications that they might have on how far it could project out. But I don't have that information right now. Okay. I'm happy to open it up if anyone's brave enough to turn their mic on and ask me a question. Please feel free. We have lots of time still. Marco on the bridge, is most of the surface area available for art? Mark, we're going to learn a lot more as we go. From what I know right now, as I mentioned, the span of the bridge, there are some limitations there. We can't do anything on the exterior. That's for safety protocols. Inside the bridge, we have some ability, but there may still be limitations. I know there is electricity available inside the bridge, so that is an option if artwork requires that. I think on the ramps, we have a lot more creative license, but that'll be a big part of that process. With the finalists, we'll really be working closely with the project manager, who may also connect with the representatives from CDOT and the rail yard and RTD as well, just to learn the full pull parameters around what can and can't be done. But definitely the ramps and the plaza a little more open. If you're envisioning something on the span of the bridge, there are going to be limitations. I just don't know all of them yet at this point.
Are they going to be breaking down the bridge project into multiple calls eventually? Just out of curiosity, since it's such a large
Yeah,
one, because that happens a lot, and
yeah,
it's
uh,
difficult from the beginning to sort of wrap your head around it.
sure.
So just,
I do not know of this one being split into multiple calls. Yeah.
and I would imagine is, well, I can find out there's a
Mhm.
prerequisite in terms of for 230,000. I'm just surprised. Anyway, so
Yeah. I mean, there's always a chance if there were, um, an additional project added, like one example, the Loretto Heights project right now has the call for sort of the interior, but then with the latest bond package, just got more budget to build a parking garage for Loretto Heights, and that will come with an additional call because that is a separate capital improvement project. So there
right.
are situations like that. I'm not aware of anything like that surrounding this bridge, but
Okay, yeah, because I know Loveland, there was a situation and they were going to be breaking it down, but not
yeah.
until once everything was submitted and it was, too much of a magnitude of a call for me to feel
Oh,
comfortable.
sure.
So that's why I was curious. Yeah,
Yeah,
but
good
thank
question.
you.
Let me look again. Let's see. You share the other public art piece on a ramp. Yeah. Um, Give me 1 second. I'm assuming you're asking about the 47th and York piece that I mentioned as a similar helix structure.
I dropped a Google Maps link in
Did you
as a
find it?
response.
Okay. I can still share it on my screen for everyone else, though, just if anyone else is interested. Just take a second. I'm gonna look, let's see. Oh, here we go. Okay. Okay. Um, so this is an image of a similar helix ramp. The Jewell Bridge will take a similar design on the east side. This was a much smaller budget, though. I want to say it was maybe 60,000, which would explain why it mostly is just painted media. But it gives you a really nice visual of a way that an artist sort of approached that unique sculpture. And this is in the Globeville area, and it was done by Anthony Garcia Sr., who is a well-known local artist. I would encourage you to go on the Denver Public Art website and just search bridge and see other pieces in our collection. There's quite a few. Also on the Denver Public Art website, if I didn't mention, there are, along with the calls, there's a number of resources that can be helpful, especially for emerging artists. There's things like there's sample contracts, there's sample budgets that show how a public artist might break down their budget. If you are chosen as a finalist in your proposal, you will be asked to present an example of what your budget might look like. So that's a helpful resource. And there's also just links to additional websites and learnings for public artists there. Okay, looking at the chat again, if you apply with another person as a team, does that impact your number of photo submissions? Yes, if you're applying as a team, you're still submitting the 6 images. So you have to think carefully, of how you would present those. One last question for University Hills. Are they open to viewing work that generates a small amount of sound that comes from movement? Yes, I believe they are. They mentioned sound and light and interactivity as something that they would welcome. So we would just have to, at that point, that would be at the proposal stage, you would meet with the people from Denver Public Library and get a little more feedback at that point of what is and isn't allowed in terms of noise, and anything you might be considering. Okay. Is there any accessibility guidance on interactivity? Um, yeah, I think it's too big of a question at this point, because it could be taken, any number of ways. But Neil, if you want to email me, I can probably, I think my colleague actually has a number of um, web links or resources that might help, in terms of just ADA and accessibility guidance.
Thank you. I was particularly interested in just general background on how the city and your unit would approach a requirement for uh, folks who have different sensory capabilities.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, each project, well, I would say at the proposal stage, um, we have members from our public art committee and cultural commission that are specifically ADA experts, and they're looking very closely at indications in the proposal that the artist is considering ways to increase accessibility. But of course, we don't expect at the proposal stage to have everything figured out, but definitely keep an eye on that in your proposal to think through, like how would a wheelchair access this space, or how might someone with a sound or visual impairment experience this piece, and, make note of ways that you might approach that. Once an artwork is selected, and the artist is under contract, you'll go, of course, through the preliminary and final design. And at that point, we'll have a number of quality control, quality assurance procedures and reviews with our ADA and as well as structural experts, who can provide more specific guidance on, what height this should be, how far this should be, things like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But again, if you want to email me, I may be able to find a resource for you that's more general at this stage. Okay, so we're at 6 o'clock. I want to give it just a couple more minutes if there's any last minute questions. And then after that, if you already know how to apply through Cafe, once we're done with questions, or at any time that you wish, you're welcome to leave the call. But anyone who might want more of a tutorial of how to log into Cafe and how to go through that process, I'm happy to stay on the call and kind of walk through that as well. Um, yeah. So any last questions that are specific to the RFQ or just the application process in general?
I have a question if a close-up of the same, I have a public art installation, a wall of glass at Fort Lewis College. And if they would want, a lot of times I submit a close-up picture to show it 17 years later, that it's still there. And so just out of curiosity, is that something, in terms of me wasting a picture, is that wasting a picture, or is that something that the panel really is helpful? I guess it's
Yeah.
an
It's
opinion.
hard to answer. It's hard because every panel is different,
Right,
looking for different things. But I guess I would think through, like, obviously the longevity is what you're trying to express, but if there's something else that the close-up provides, like if there's a textural component or a light refraction, or something that you can only see in that close-up,
right,
that seems important to that call, then I would emphasize that. But it's gonna,
yeah.
if it
Like a
doesn't
crap
add and you
sheet.
have other projects that show your range or connect to the themes better, I mean, that's the tough part is editing down, but it's
Right,
it's a really good question. I'm not there, each person on the panel is gonna view these artworks in their entirety on their own independently on Cafe. So I'm not with them every step of the way as they're looking through and voting. So
right,
I couldn't say exactly what each person is looking for. I will say once we sort of take those votes and I narrow it down to like the top 20%. Kind of depends on how many people apply. And that's when the panel meets again. And we go through all of those artworks in much more detail. And we talk through the statement of interest and we have conversations and we do rounds and rounds of voting until we get to those finalists. And at that point, you know, I think they're really looking at how it relates to the RFQ goals and if it seems somewhat feasible for their location. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Any information's helpful.
Yeah, sure. It's a good question.
Um,
Zoom user, I think the statement of interest is very important. That's what I think. But I think it's especially important if there's something in your images that, isn't saying what if you're just like I'm a muralist, but I really want to do a sculpture, like say that in your statement of interest. Or if it's your first time, say like, here's how I'm going to fill that gap. Or really call attention to the fact that like you're local or that you know a lot about this community or that you're just really excited. I think those things are quite important, but every person is different. What sort of resume items are ideal to highlight if your public art experience is just now emerging? I mean, that's always kind of the hardest question is if you're just kind of breaking into this, like how do you show your experience before you get that first public art piece? Um, I would show obviously examples of exhibitions or other sort of art milestones that you've had. Um, I don't know. Other than that, I would see if you can relate it to the call at all. If this is a call that they're really looking for intense community engagement and you have something on your resume that shows, community engagement experience, I would just kind of think through what each panel is looking for. I know that's a lot of work to sort of fine tune your resume for every single call, but if that's where you're at, it's worth really looking to any way you can kind of ramp that up. I will say I think they look at the statement of interest and the images a lot more than the resume, is my impression. I think, but you never know. Okay. Well, thank you all for your attention. Thank you for everything. I I will hang on the line here if anyone wants to go through sort of just how do you log into Cafe. I'm happy to give a tutorial. It seemed like most people were pretty familiar, but anyone who's not, I'm still here for another half an hour if you want to look through. And for everyone else, um, apply and shoot me an email if you have a more specific question along the way. And I look forward to seeing your work. Thank you.
so thanks for your time.
Of course. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Those of you that are still on the call, are you here to learn about call for entry? Just need some indication that people are still here. Yes, thumbs up. Great. Okay. Let me share my screen again. Sometimes people, just walk away from a meeting and you never know if they're still there. Okay, hold on one second. Okay, so callforentry.org is a website that's used not just for public art. You'll see it used for any number of exhibitions or art opportunities. So if you're not familiar with it, it's worth getting acclimated if you're planning to apply for other opportunities. We call it CAFE. It stands for callforentry.org. It is actually a Colorado company, just a little note there. So this is what the homepage might look like. The first thing you're going to want to do is log in, well, create a login and log in as an artist. You can sign up and make an account for free. Pretty self-explanatory there. So once you're logged in, you're going to go through a few stages and definitely just spend some time getting used to the website. But first, the first thing it's actually going to have you do is upload your work samples before you apply them to a specific call. This is because like you could have a whole portfolio of images kind of loaded up and you might apply different ones to different calls. You're kind of sort of building your portfolio there first. Um, and then it'll have you find your specific call and then finish the process. So you'll be kind of following along this ribbon up top here as you go through. So to upload the images, you'll be here in My Portfolio, and then it will ask you to upload your media. This is where it can be a little finicky. If it's your first time, you might have an image that's, a TIFF file and you didn't realize it, and it says, no, you can't use this, or it might be too small and it says, there's a problem. That's because, again, like I mentioned earlier, it's only going to let you upload JPEGs, and it's going to have a minimum requirement of 1200 pixels. It'll tell you that, but just to be aware of so you can kind of prep your images before you get to this stage. And again, all of these images are just sort of stored in your portfolio, so you can load more than 6 here, and then you'll select the ones you want to put towards the RFQ. It is a fairly time intensive process at first because it's going to ask you all of this information about each image. So it's going to have you choose that file under 5 megabytes, minimum of 1200 on the longest side. It's going to ask you the title. It's going to ask you the medium, the height, width, depth. I believe those are all required fields. I could be wrong, but I think they are. So just do your best to guess if you don't know whether the artwork is for sale, what the valuation is, when it was completed, what discipline you would consider it, whether it was a public art piece or an art in public places, and then your description. In this description, this is where you might want to note things, if applicable, like, done in partnership with this other artist, or close-up detail of previous image, or, not every image is going to need that in depth of a description, but some might. But yeah, anything you want us to know that you feel is specific to the call and what they're looking for, and then you'll add that to your portfolio. And once you have added all of your images, then you can go back to the top menu bar and you can find a call. This is where you can search any call in the country and specify whether you want it to be in a certain state or public art specifically. For the 3 calls that I mentioned today, you can search them exactly by their name or Denver Public Art. And if you have any trouble finding them, let me know, but they are also linked on the Denver Public Art website. If you scroll all the way down, there's an Apply Now button, and it'll take you right to the call for entry listing for that call. Once you have found it, you'll go through the process of applying for that call. So in this example, it's the Bible Park Playground, and it's my colleague Megan's info up top, and it says the deadline up top. And you will add your resume, which I think needs to be PDF. And this is where you will submit your statement of interest too. I do think that Cafe can be a little glitchy if you copy and paste it directly from Microsoft Word. I have heard it recommended that you first paste it into like the Notes app or something. That they may have fixed that, but I do mention it just to make sure that after you've pasted or written that in, that you just kind of review it and make sure there aren't like weird characters or it hasn't messed up your formatting, because it has been known to happen. And once your resume and statement are how you like them, then you can save, and you can always log out and return back to this. But that's now you will choose your images, and this is where you'll go to My Portfolio, which is where you've already loaded up sort of your bank of images, and you can select the 6 or 4, 5, or 6 that you want to submit for this call. And then you will complete that and save your application. It doesn't show it here, but somewhere along this in the checkout process, you will also be prompted to click on a link to fill out a required survey. That is a survey that is required by Denver Public Art that needs to be part of the application. It's a demographic survey to help us track our outreach and engagement efforts. It has no bearing on your application and is not shared with panelists. And if there are any questions that you're not comfortable with, you can select prefer not to answer. Another thing to note for Denver Public Art calls, there should never be a fee. So they should all charge you $0 at this sort of checkout phase. If it's saying anything else, email me, email the administrator that's listed because that is a mistake. There are other calls nationwide that may have a fee, but Denver Public Art ones will never have a fee. And that's it. Yeah, once you finish that, then you proceed to checkout, and it's submitted. If you're not sure, like if it's your first time, feel free to email me if you just want me to verify that your application is showing up. I'm happy to do that. I do that all the time. So don't be shy if you're like, I think I did it, but I'm not sure if it's there, because I'm here to help you guys. If you have any issues with just Cafe itself, with the technology, I am less helpful, but Cafe is very helpful, and you can just click on Cafe Help or email. It'll prompt you to email Cafe Help at wearecreativewest.org. You don't need to remember that. It'll link it, and they're pretty responsive. Excuse me. They should get back to you within a day with advice on any technical issue that you might have. Okay. Hopefully that helps a little bit. I would just recommend trying it out, before the day of the deadline and just kind of working through any quirks. But again, feel free to reach out if there's issues. Okay. Okay, I'm just looking at the chat one more time just to make sure we covered everything. Website suggests that the Ross Hill is open till December 20th. Oh, that's good to know. Thank you for pointing that out. I will check it. I may extend the deadline. If we look on December 1st and there's not enough, there's always the possibility that calls could get extended, but I would count on it closing on December 1st. Yeah. Okay. And Chantel, since you're still on the call, happen to know when the space seeking indoor. Yeah, Ross University Hills. I don't remember off the top of my head what day in December it is closing, but if you go to their website, if you just Google Ross University Hills, I know it says it on their homepage. I want to say December 19th, but I'm not confident right now. So double check that. But yeah, it's definitely by mid-December, it'll be closed to the public. Yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you both. Any last questions? All right. All right, I'm going to sign off then. Thank you so much.